think it should be understood that the hearts of our people are still with people that are physically out there doing stuff on the street. And I'd like to recognize the fact that racial profiling doesn't only happen to Aboriginal men, it happens to women. And that's the biggest issue that's been confronting our organization, is the violence that is occurring against Indigenous women and the violence that is occurring against Indigenous young men. And so I'd like to briefly talk about our involvement in the Frank Paul inquiry and the ongoing struggle for recognition of the 500 Indigenous missing women that are missing here in Canada today. When we were elected 2 years ago, the organization was in kind of a reorganizing phase, and we realized that there is very little trust amongst our Indigenous population to the way that we organize politics. And it was referenced before, the Indian Act, the presidency, the very elitist title of my name as a vice president doesn't agree with our grassroots people. And we took it upon ourselves to take this organization and change it, and to change it in the way that we enlist the people to participate in their own change. And so we looked at the fact that there's 3 marginalized groups within our population that aren't involved in anything, that the major decisions on the land and in the social programming area, where we feel that they have a sense of belonging. And that's obviously our Indigenous women, our elders, and our young people. And so we made a conscious decision to change that. And that's the reason why our organization is reaching out and being able to be successful in speaking out on these issues of Frank Paul and missing Indigenous women. Frank Paul was a Mi'kmaq person, Mi'kmaq man. He went to residential school. He was a migrant worker. He worked as a cherry and apple picker in Maine, which is the south of his home territory in Nova Scotia. And about 25 years ago, he moved out to BC because of the apple picking in Washington State. Because of a lot of the amount of colonization that occurred in residential school, a sense of sadness and not belonging to a particular cause or even an identity has happened to all of our people across this country. And as a result of that loss of identity, loss of hope, loss of dreams, a lot of our people have gone and wrapped up in their own colonization. And when they get wrapped up in their own colonization, all of the things that we talk about, these negative things that we talk about Aboriginal people, they come about. And Frank Paul was another one of those statistics. And he was a victim of his own colonization and a victim of this state that's done everything they can to deny him his human rights and his rights as an Aboriginal person. And he succumbed to that. One night in December 7th, 1998, he was picked up early in the afternoon by police, as he always was when he was drinking rice wine. He was brought before the police, and usually because somebody has a duty of care, it was expected of them to take his condition into account, and that was denied. That was looked after, wasn't looked after. They didn't take his pulse. They didn't take into account that he was possibly hypothermic. And then they released him out into the streets again once he sobered up. About 3 hours later, they picked him up again, and the police brought him into the jail cells. Officer Sanderson, Jail Sergeant Sanderson, took a look at him and determined, even the fact that he was passed out, rain all over him, that he was okay to go away from the jail, that he wasn't he was in a condition that he can get up and go take care of himself. And so he ordered Constable Instant, who was the jail van driver at that night, to drive off and to take him to his residence, even though he was of no fixed address, to take him to his residence, which was the street. And regardless of that order, Constable Instant took him into an alleyway in a non-lit part of town, in an area where nobody goes by, and dropped him off in the middle of nowhere in near freezing weather conditions. And 4 hours later, they found Frank Paul dead. everything that we've known about this case since 1998 typifies the relationship that we feel that we as Aboriginal people have with police and with authority. And that's one of an antagonist relationship, one in which that we feel we're constantly guilty of something. We were talking about it earlier. We were joking about the fact that if an alarm goes off when we're in Walmart, we suddenly feel guilty about something. And that's honestly how we feel as a race of people. It's like, oh man, what did we do? Did we do something wrong? And then, of course, we realize that we're a good people. We're a proud people of who we are. And so we take into offense when our young people are accosted like that. And the fact that we were able to put a complaint, the very first complaint as an organization in 2002, we wrote a lengthy letter to the Police Complaints Commissioner about Frank Paul. And it was a work of some of the activists that we see here tonight, the long, long work of protesting, letter writing, and getting out there and making sure that Frank Paul's name didn't go the way of Fred Quill, go the way of the 37 Aboriginal men that have died since 1964, and go that way where nobody understands their name. I know when RCMP people get killed in the line of duty, everybody in Canada knows their name. But I challenge those same officers, those same family members, to say one of our names, just one of our young person's name, one of the 500 missing women's name. And we see the type of relationship that is governed, and the type of relationship that we as Indigenous people continually to comply with, and the people that are within this room continue to accept. And I think that that's something that the Frank Paul inquiry, while it's in nature it's a colonial instrument, there is, if you go down to there, it's a group of white dudes all talking and arguing about us as brown people, and we're off in the gallery kind of snickering and getting mad a little bit. But at the end of it, we'll be able to get to some of the truths behind what really happened to that man that night. Why wasn't it that the police didn't order a coroner's inquest? Why was it that 3 years later after he died that an RCMP called the family and said that he died of a hit and run? Why was it that even after he died there was a continual denial? That the VPD today, this guy DeHaas gets up and he has this video, this presentation where it shows a picture of the back of the place that Frank Paul was dropped off at, that shows a shelter. It shows a shelter where it's at and says that this is obviously a place where the man expired, but that was a complete fabrication. It was a lie. He was left in the alley, in the dirt and in the mud. And so once we get to that truth of that and start revealing the amount of our young men that are succumbing to this type of violence, this type of profiling, then I think that's the basis of any so-called new relationship. And I think that that's what our young people and our women and our elders are waking up to, is that we can participate in that change, and it's through events like this that we're able to express some of these ideas. So I didn't want to go on for too long. I really appreciate everybody's attendance here tonight. I'd like to say thank you to the Coast Salish and our friends in the back, and I hope the evening goes well. Thank you.
Now